Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm a little bit confused this week, you know why. And yesterday, when I had all that hiccups with tech, I was thinking, oh my God, what if this happens during a podcast, right? If the connection
Happens.
goes down, it
Totally,
happens.
totally happens.
Or if how will I keep my dog away from barking?
Why would
She
you do that?
barks a lot
Why would you do that?
because do you want a dog barking during a podcast?
If it's what happens, that's what happens.
Okay,
I think
so
it sounds to
I
me like you're
shouldn't be
coming.
so worried about
Yeah,
this
it sounds like
stuff.
you're coming up with things to worry about, as opposed to just kind of like, yeah, I got a dog. I had Chewy bark. I'm just like, oh, there goes Chewy. People love it. They're like, oh
Okay,
my God, let me see the dog. Or you, if you want, I'm not saying that's just my take. Like you
yeah,
could,
but
if you
it's
want to be
good.
very sterile and just kind of, sealed. That's a whole vibe too. Then you have to but it's up to you. What I'm saying is like, don't look for
You are
reasons
loose
to
about
worry
these
about it.
things.
Me personally, like, what am I gonna do? Like, I just don't let it bother me.
Okay, that's a good. It's good to listen that.
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean,
thank you.
especially because you're doing it independently. It's not like you have a
Mhm.
producer and an assistant and an engineer and a scheduling coordinator.
Yeah,
Unless you do,
all in
I'm sure
one.
you don't.
No, of course not. All in one.
Yeah, so you just embrace it, and I don't necessarily think people have it's you. It's not like it's the BBC, you know.
Yeah, I know. That's what I really do appreciate about you is that ability to see things in a more loose way. It's awesome.
Thank you.
And I met again Neely this week. I made a master class with him following a course I made last September.
Sorry, who
And
was?
I J. Paul Neely, you interviewed him
Oh,
on a
okay. Yes,
podcast.
yes, yes, yes.
I met him in September. I attended a workshop and then a master class this week. And I was so surprised with everything that I'm learning with you. The perspective is completely different. When I was listening to him this week, it's such a change since September, and I was really satisfied, really pleased with that. Only attending these office hours and being exposed to your community and to you is really amazing. And thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. What was the master class?
It was about speculative design. His approach,
Do
he's
you have a?
very
Do you have a
systematic. He's very systematic. It's a completely different thing. He has templates, this stuff to go from signals to a prototype.
Mhm.
So it's systematic, although people asked about, people are very into the process. What is the right process to arrive to the prototype, from signals to prototypes? It's very rigid. People are very focused on that. Also, because I think that people claim that the companies where they work might ask for that. They thought that the companies don't want a chaotic process somehow. And I thought this discussion was really fun. So he talks about this, but he's not tied to it. He shares his process, but in the end he says, okay, you should adapt this and do whatever it feels right for you. But it's interesting.
Yeah. Do you have a link to the class? I'm just curious how it's described and framed and all that.
A link to the class. How? What are you
Well, there was
asking,
some
Joe?
place you went to sign up for something. Yeah.
And no, it was Zoom.
Sorry.
It was a Zoom workshop.
Yeah. Okay. So at some point you found out about it. Where and how did you find out about
Oh,
it?
you want the website? Yes, I can put it here. Yes. And the other thing very good that happened in both workshops, September and now, is that they always use your IKEA work as an example, and also the cereal box with the cricket
Mm.
flower cereal. He explored this week to show people what is in the labels of the box and whatsoever. So it's fun. I will share it here.
Okay.
I actually arrived there because I listened to your podcast and went to his website, and from there I think that I arrived to this link that I left in the chat now.
Okay.
How are we all doing?
I feel like the ice has been broken now, so doing good.
Seems like there's a big docket of projects right now.
Of what?
Of projects, we have a big project docket. How are we feeling about that? Good, excited, overwhelmed?
I feel good about it. You know, I'm excited. I'm trying to figure out what to do to, because there's that. What is it? There's that gap, the last like 4% of something where it's like can totally flame out. It's like we got this, we got this. We go, oh, out of fuel. Shit. gliding in, not going to make the airport. So I'm sort of sensitive to that. And also at the same time, I feel like I've stacked a bunch of stuff. So there's a project Dre and I are working on that we do have to get done. So that's got to get done. So that takes time and energy, and also the book launch and just trying to make stuff to social media it and all that, kind of keep that energy and momentum up. And then there are a bunch of talks that I did that just completely diverts your time and attention and creative energy away from other things. And then started feeling guilty. I was like, fuck man, I needed to do another podcast. So then you start worrying about that. So
Yeah,
a lot going on. Like nothing bad. The
just a
only
lot.
thing is
A
like
lot to manage, a lot to maintain.
a lot to manage. And then like some weird plumbing issue, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, that's like life management, right? There's creative practice management, there's life management, and there's like work management.
Hmm.
And so trying to equally balance time and attention can be really challenging for that, you know, I find. My parents were recently in town and I realized they've upgraded their negotiation methods. Mm. Does someone want to fill me in how the chore coat ideation went on Thursday?
There's Kemp. Now,
Hey, I
there's
am.
also, I put the video up just in the channel.
Oh, good. Okay. Sorry. Then I don't have to.
No, it's. I think it'd be useful to have a brief.
Somebody.
I was gonna say if I could like before you jump into it, because you're gonna get into it to more detail, Kemp, but I like the ideation session. I thought it was really good, and I liked your approach at brainstorming or just generating ideas around things that were related to the coat without talking about the coat itself. Like asking us what vehicle might we be using in that future. And to me, it just got me thinking of like, oh yeah, where are the places the coat is going to live in? What seats are we going to sit in that, you know, what will the coat interact with in the surroundings? And I thought that was a really useful and fun way to generate ideas around the coat. Anyways, that's my two takes on that.
I really appreciate that feedback, Joy, because I think I'm trying something new. If I were to do this straight up for like a fashion garment, it would be a very different process where we basically go out like source materials or source like garments, and then we basically like, you know, take other trends and then formulate. It would all basically be off of garments. And I was trying to think about this in a non-garment perspective. I originally had a board up of other garments, like other coats, and I decided let's take a shift away from that and think about like things like cars and whatnot. Sorry, I'm out walking my cat right now, so I'm just walking indoors. We'll be on my computer in a second. And so I think it worked out really well, and I actually think that it kind of lended itself to an overall goal that I had, which was this digital iteration that has been coming up a bunch. And Julian, if you don't mind chiming in while I log on to my computer, I can share my screen in a second. But do you mind talking about sort of the second thing that we did yesterday and any thoughts that you have on it? The accessories board.
Yes, we did an accessories board, which was, and I just kind of went mental while Kemp was talking and we were talking and just throwing things in. And I wasn't sure exactly where to start because Kemp started with he wanted to accessorize with a spoiler, like a car spoiler. And I was like, what is, and I was trying to imagine, it's like, you know, sometimes like the Dracula cape, he'll have like a huge thing behind him. And so like, that's all I was fixated on. I was like, what the hell is Kemp talking about? And so, but I didn't say that, but I was just thinking, I was literally asking the question, what is he talking about? And then I just started looking around at the things that I would, in the mechanic of accessorizing, because Kemp was also talking about, he was kind of sort of seasoning it with insights and perspectives from the Tom Sachs thing, which was the Rocket Factory, to be more precise. And that the Rocket Factory started with, you know, the idea of like you get 3 parts of the rocket, each one's an NFT. If you get all 3, then they come together in a kind of like Wonder Twins power activate sort of moment, and then you kind of, you can launch the rocket, all that kind of stuff. So those mechanics were something that we talked about a bunch during the first session in the morning. Dre, when you were there, and Jed was there, and Christina, you were there. And so I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking, yeah, I don't know. And so I just started throwing things in that like accessories that I would like to have or I have, you know, so I just started looking on myself, like what are the things that I have, and some of them were like this keychain or this key holder belt loop thing. So I just started throwing that stuff in there, and without really thinking too much, a bunch of kind of like utilitarian, like Miltech kind of stuff that that's sort of connected. And I don't know, is that what I was supposed to be talking about, Kim? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was really, thank you for giving me a little bit of time. I needed to log on because I want to share my screen, if that's cool. And yeah, let's go there. So the first part of the morning yesterday, we started off doing these personas, which really were based on, and this is in the Miro board if anyone wants to log into it, but basically, I came up with like just 4 questions. These questions sort of changed over the day because I thought I was going to redo it, but non-garment related questions. So it's not like, what is this person wearing as they go into the near future? But what came out of the first ideation session was less about the coat and more about the motivation of going into the near future, and what one does in the near future and what one does in our lab. And this character of the near future laboratory adventurer. And so I became more interested in that. And these keywords sort of came up for me with that. And so I started thinking about these types of images. And then that first part of the session led me, and then we went through these questions, which I'll get to later. But then the second session, which Julie and I did, I wanted to think about, so let's shift from physical coat to digital coat right now. The physical coat is going to be pretty straightforward. And next week I'll have some drawings for that. But this digital coat, I wanted to think about it, if that's our place for iterative exploration, and a place for this character development to really exist, and also a place for all of us to have an opportunity to kind of share what we think of as the near future, or what we as an explorer in the near future would want. So I think there's a range from pragmatic to totally fantastical. And for some reason, I've always been obsessed with these spoilers on cars, like this whale tail, which has this sort of, in America, really this like gaudy, tacky connotation with tattoos as well. And then there's this, $3 million speed tail that just came out 2 years ago on a McLaren, so they're all about aerodynamics. And so I kept thinking about like my NFL avatar in the digital space would be consumed with this idea of like drama and speed and getting there as fast as they can because I got to get back and walk my cat, right? Like this like obsession with this narrative. And it is fantasy, right? But while I'm there, like the spoiler is going to like kind of come out of my coat and get me there even faster. And so if I had a digital NFT that I wanted to have be really playful and fun and something that I would want to spend money on, I would want there to be a chore coat that had this utilitarian vibe with this McLaren spoiler / Porsche spoiler that came out the back of it. And then as Julie and I were talking, I could sense that Julian was sort of like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then it became a little bit more pragmatic, right? And it was like, all right, well, what about the moleskin pocket, right? So then it's like, from a financial standpoint, we can't add every element into this chore coat. We also don't want to make a really basic chore coat. So I think I found a way around that a little bit. But there's an element here for collaborations, but also just like, we could do some digital iterations of like a Tom Sachs where we do some drawings for each of these items that us as a collective kind of create as the first drop, so to speak. So maybe the first drop has a spoiler, has a Lycra camera pocket, has a moleskin, has a walkie-talkie. We started getting into it, and against my environmental judgment, I love Container Store. And I just kept thinking like, well, when I go to the near future, I want to put things in containers, right? So is there a way to do like a Lunchables / storage container where I can eat and collect things at the same time. And then that made me think about, how do we repair this code? And then Silly String came up as like a way of possibly like lighting your way and marking territory. And all of a sudden, what I think I noticed for us was this world of creativity sort of emerged, that we each have a different version of the near future, which is part of what I think is beautiful about the lab, is that it's not this one narrative that has come from a top down, like this is the near future, you have to buy into it. And if you don't, you're not welcome. And I think all of us, I kind of want to celebrate all of us as these little explorers. So this is sort of the direction I'm going for the digital, which would be a Tom Sachs-esque illustrated accessory to the coat. So we'll make the coat. Next week, I'm planning on creating some drawings for the physical coat to show which direction I'm going in for the coat. And then while I'm doing that, my assignment or my request, I'll say to everybody who's willing, would be to come up with like a list of 2 or 3 accessories that could be potentially like illustrated for our first drop. And then maybe a little bit of why. And Julian and I kind of talked about like, why can simply just be beautiful. One thing that came up was this idea of a toolkit. And my mind went immediately to these Louis Vuitton toolkits. And I think Chanel did a toolkit one time. And, it doesn't have to be super pragmatic. I think that's the beauty of why I come here each week, is that I don't have to talk to everybody about how we're going to monetize an NFT white t-shirt, for like this, for Zara, which I don't think they're going to do right away. So there's something about the pragmatic nature. Yes, I like that, but I also want to encourage the spectrum of like, why not be fully on that spectrum of pragmatic to fantasy? So that's sort of where we landed. I really enjoyed doing this board yesterday. And yeah, any feedback, any thoughts on this? Am I articulating it, giving a clear picture? Or?
Maybe one thing I'd say to the point about, so at some point, like there were just things that that made sense, just I guess the point, like just because they were like, there's something fetishy about it. Like,
Yeah.
What was that one thing that I clipped in there? That weird, I don't have Miro open, but it's in between the watch and the shoe.
Oh yeah, this
Just like a machine piece of aluminum kind of like connector thing. I'm not even sure exactly what it is. But
right.
there's just something like cool about it. And I want it to be okay that something can just be cool. And the question that you ask yourself, if someone says like, well, what is it? You say like, I don't know. That's okay. Because the next step, if you can learn how to push past that and say like, I don't know, but I'm trying to feel what it is. Like, what is it about this thing? And that you allow that to be able to take time. And part of that just comes from like a recent experience I had when I was trying to when I was preparing for this talk, and I started someplace with the schematic of the Star Trek communicator, and I've had that technical manual since I was like 6 or something, and I never knew what it was about it that just kind of drew me to it. And I think it took years, but now it's like, okay, now I get it, and I can talk about it. And so I was just fascinated by the fact that I could just live with that thing as just something that was like, ooh, I don't know, just look at it, it's cool. And other people would respond if they saw it, they'd be like, oh yeah, this is cool, it's weird, something cool. That's amazing, and that was as far as the language got. And it maybe never needed to go any further, except that I wanted to unearth and unpack like why it was cool.
Yeah.
To better understand the kind of work that we're all trying to do here. Like, so yeah. Same thing with like the Silly String, I guess, to a certain degree. It's nice that it's glow in the dark, but it was because Kemp, you put up the, what's in the bottom left of that square? There was the Lunchables, and yeah, I don't know, something about that just took me back to the wonder, the way in which you sort of think and see and understand and play in the world when you're a kid, I guess.
Yeah, and I think to kind of stem off that, like one of the things that really came up in the first ideation session that had nothing to do with garments, that I think is a really strong point of why we come here, is that there isn't a directive about our identities, right? And my independent work is a lot around identity and gender. So I love the idea that this space gets to explore that, right? Like I was just watching American Horror Story. I'm not sure if anyone's watching that right now, but there's a strong dominatrix, strong S&M element to that. So like if somebody in this group has that direction for their NFL character, right? Like there's space for this in this group of being like, nope, I go into the near future and I am this type of character, or this is the space that I, within context, I'm not trying to like really blow it out of proportion here, but like, I don't want us to try to like, when I design a lot of garments, there's so many restrictions on it. And I guess what I'm trying to get to with this first drop is be like, let's just open it up for all of our personalities to be like, nope, when I go into the near future, this is my character, this is who I am. Either it is your alter ego or it is I asked Julian yesterday, I was like, do you go into the near future as you, or do you go into it as an alter ego? And he was like, I go into it as me. And I definitely go into it as an alter ego, so I think, there's not a wrong or right answer to it, but the physical coat, we have a lot of limitations on, mostly because of cost. And the more research I do into chore coats that are physical chore coats, the more crazy they get, the more they sort of miss the mark, in my opinion, unless you're Raf Simons and you've done this like incredible collaboration with, someone who's quilting in Amish country. So, and those coats are like 3,000 a piece. So for us to be accessible into this actual physical coat, I really want to keep it simple. But then I think this digital space of these illustrations could be really a fun place to start off. And then I see this as potentially like an iterative drop each season, right? And then we can have our own like, like maybe one season I buy the spoiler and then the next season I buy the silly string. And then this avatar or this character emerges. So I think it helps give some identity to our lab as well, which I'm really invested in.
Yeah, I like the freedom of the like digital version of just like getting to be able to like try stuff and not really have the same consequences as trying in the real world might have, or at least like not the same. And then for like the physical side, it's kind of been stuck in my head, but like sometimes the coat just needs to start, and then as we kind of maybe start defining the coats more and more for ourselves, with our avatars, that can be what drives the evolution of the physical one.
That's what I was thinking too. Like the coat can the physical coat can, the way that I want to design it could maybe just be a framework structure that sort of like think about like a simple foundation of a house where it then gets to evolve. And I was thinking a lot about the Tom Sachs rocket launch. What if one day we do a workshop at, I always want to call it Elysium, which sounds like a total cult, but Elysian, Julian, that place up in near NorCal?
Esalen.
Still sounds like a cult, but it has that vibe where like, if we did a retreat, like what if we did, or like a chore coat hackathon where it's like, I literally find a way to attach a spoiler to this coat somehow. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't have to make sense right now. And I'm really adamant about things not having to make sense all the time, but I also want this coat to just get made. So there's like a kind of a nice line of like, let's just get it made and then leave room for the exploration of the random later. And I don't want to get bogged down in like, oh, the pockets need to do this, this, and this, and the zippers need to be all over the place. It's like, okay, so I think I found a way for all of that to kind of have some place. But this digital space, I think, could be really fun to explore. So if you guys are down, I'll put a little brief together and I'll post it on Discord, asking people for this first round of like, just to explore what accessories they would want on their character.
I think one thing is like for the physical one, you can, and I think you're kind of alluding to it, but we can keep this same like mentality of it being a canvas to try on. It's just like the way you try it is different. It's physical, like there isn't.
Yeah, I won't go too far into it because this is a dangerous thing to do because it's not the aesthetic that I'm going for. But I got really into these charm coats from the 80s. I'm not sure if anyone grew up in the 80s to remember this, but the charm coats of these 80s where you can basically attach, well, these are actually art pieces, but then there's these coats where people attached anything and everything to them. I'm not saying we're going in this direction, but the idea of there being a link from this to that in a less, Versace from the 80s meets Jordache and more of a like Fairfax streetwear meets MIT Media Labs. There's something about that I think we could kind of hit that mark. And I could see somebody physically wearing it. Like I can see people physically wearing a coat with some of these things. Instead of your keys dangling off it, it can be, you've bought the physical components to attach your walkie-talkie, your silly string, your Lunchable case. And maybe the spoiler is this like gaudy attachment that somebody is full on committed to, like myself.
At the very least, we could have a bunch of NFL flair.
Totally.
All kinds of badges and patches and pins and
What about e-textiles?
that too.
I don't know if that's the direction we're thinking in.
Like conductive thread and that kind of stuff and electroluminescent material.
Yeah, I had a friend who was in town for this hardware conference over the weekend, and he is working on creating incredibly small LED strips. Like he's from MIT Media Lab. He works in the e-textile space. So I don't know if like what. I know we're at a point where we're still ideating, so maybe I'll just keep that to my character first.
No, so Camille, that's something I really want to get into. If you don't mind, maybe we chat about that, and if you could connect us and we can have a conversation about it. Because all I know about that space from my research during grad school days is that it's expensive. It may have come down a lot in price, but
I mean, it's still expensive, and also it's like very kind of limited application, right? Like you can see Google Project Awry has some like videos about use cases and stuff, but it's also like, if people own e-textiles, how do they know how/when they can wash it, right?
Right.
Like
but I think there's
it's
something
consumer prohibitive in a lot of ways, but yeah, I will, I can connect you guys.
I think people would, I'm just thinking about our consumer. I think a consumer might expect that from us at some point. So I'm not saying it needs to be our first piece, but I wouldn't want to be blindsided by, I'm already thinking like when Vogue writes the article about this coat, we want to be able to have that conversation like, yeah, and we're interested in these materials and, who knows where it goes. But I think it's something I need to get more versed in. So I would love to update on that. And Dre, also to that point that Camille just made, I was thinking a little bit about information exchange, and you kind of talked about this yesterday. ways in which we could possibly like leave information or pick up information. So maybe there's something there digitally as well that when you're thinking about your accessories, there's like a digital format of exchange of information. If that makes any sense. You seem to kind of know that world.
Yeah. I kind of know the world. I'm still thinking about it abstractly, but yeah, I do like thinking about information. The more I look at this board and the more we talk about it, the more I'm just thinking of things as just imagining like, oh yeah, we should have like some geocache type of item here. Like
Totally.
Speaking of information, like what's a small canister, container, or capsule that you could roll up some information and plant somewhere, and then what are the tools that you might need? Because magnets are usually really useful for geocaching, because a lot of people like stick things in places you can only access with a magnet. So little ideas like that. But as far as information, Camille's point too of what kind of like digital e-textile stuff that gets really interesting, because being able to embed LEDs or EL fabric and have conductive fabric, now you can communicate information like flashing words on your back as you're biking down the street, or all kinds of wonderful ideas like that. Anyways, this is just a rabbit hole of a code.
I love that. Yeah, and it's sort of like, that's exactly what I kind of want for right now. When Julian put up the silly string and then the spray paint, I kept thinking like, that's where my mind first went to like a collab with an actual, IRL company, right? Like a spray paint company would love the idea of doing, I would imagine, a collaboration with like there's a glow in the dark spray paint that futurists use to communicate with each other the way that taggers use. Like I'm kind of always in the back of my head thinking about monetary streams that can self-fund our drops so that we can explore more. Not to like, I'm not somebody who believes that monetization is a bad thing. I think it can give us some exploration freedom. Even this idea of like an earthquake kit that came up, this is the one that Kim Kardashian, I think, invested into, which is mostly just packaging, I think, is the big criticism of it. But like, there's just some obvious collabs here that I think we could pull away from over time. This one, I love this. I actually saw this. If anyone goes to the Westfield Mall, I was there like a week ago and somebody was rolling their cat around in this. And I never thought I'd be a cat person. I'm obsessed with my cat now. I think she's actually like right behind me. And yeah, there she is in her little blanket. But I just like love this idea of the chore coat having like a sidecar for your pet, and when Julie and I were talking about this, like, Chewy would be in a sidecar going to the near future. Who's ever met Chewy? Like, there's no way he wouldn't be. And Preesh would be in there too. So it's like, there's just something fun about this that I feel like also takes the intensity out of futuring, but also kind of like allows us to be more like get into it more almost in a weird way. So anyway, I won't keep hyping it up, but this is sort of where I'm going with it.
Yeah, I just pasted next close to the cat. I just pasted a screen grab from Westworld. There's this character in the second season that has a shirt, and it's got a whole bunch of words that are stacked around, and as the story unfolds in that scene, the words on his shirt light up based on his mood. And I remember looking at that and imagining what would be how could you actually build that? And I actually designed using EL electroluminescent panels, sewed inside of a shirt so that this could actually work.
Yes, that's actually brings up a really good point. I was thinking about how does one translate or communicate in the near future, right? Like a lot of us, I mean, we all speak English, but the Arrival movie, what if it's visual language? We've gone from text to GIF to TikToks to, like what, there's a way for this coat.
Yeah.
If we're going to get really, really, I want to go from one spectrum of this, like the keychain toolkit kind of thing, all the way up to this, like, how does this, because I forget who it was. It might've been David, but somebody, or Thomas, I can't remember who it was, made a comment about this coat having akin-like features. And I really love this idea of the coat being this, having this akin feature, like being your, I don't want to overuse the word sidekick, but being an extension of you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I was going to say, in an old school way, you could set it up with a galvanic sensor, right? The coat is touching you and it just measures the resistance of your skin, which is what like polygraphs use, or you can use it to detect stress. It's basically sentiment analysis, or just hook it up to an Apple Watch and then you detect sentiment analysis, and now you have like sentiment projection on a shirt.
Yeah.
Well, and there's an interesting tie between that and the digital version of the coat, and how does it actually do your real emotions into your digital coat?
That's cool, like a mood ring of a coat. That's cool,
right? But only actually real, not just random colors.
Don't talk to that guy. His coat's red. Wait for it to turn green.
Right. Or go hug that guy. His coat's blue.
I love that. And then that I chimed in right as Camille was talking about family, and I just started doing like family therapy because my family's got a lot of issues, and it's like that would be so perfect for my family therapies to wear that coat. It's like, oh, mom, you're not in the right place for this. Your coat, like. So I feel like this is, this is the type of stuff that I just geek out on. So I'm actually going to delete the board, like these things below, and then I'll just expand this board. So feel free to add to the actual Miro board. If you want to add your, like a little post-it with your @name on it, so we can track who's what, that's great. If you don't, that's fine too. Or if you want to send me a direct message of a list of things. The next step from this is going to be doing illustrations. We're compiling the list. We'll vote on this list, or we'll like condense the list, and then we'll do some illustrations. So also start thinking if anyone is into illustration in a sense of that, keep that in the back of your head.
So my, just to add, after listening to you guys, my one note of caution from experience is that if we, so like let's take the the coat that does a whole bunch of like technically challenging things, is that chances are we won't actually be able to create that. I know it feels like possible and imminent, but just it's a challenge enough to even get a project within the group like going, let alone completed. Like we haven't finished anything. I'm not saying that we won't. I'm just saying that there are significant challenges. And so imagining into those things is awesome. And also trying to think creatively about how you can actually represent what you're imagining without having to have like a PhD in electrical engineering, these are the things that we do. So like Dre, the project that we're working on, we're imagining a whole bunch of things from a world of, the ubiquitously autonomous world, but we're not making a single one of those things. We're not actually making, the network of autonomous dumpsters. Why are we not making it? Because we're just trying to help people see into that world. So if we're trying to say that we're going to figure out somehow magically how to get some conductive fabric to interpret our emotions, ain't going to happen. It's almost like, for sure, even if we were like, I mean, Elon Musk can't even get his Neuralink to work, let alone Twitter. So if the world's richest man can't do that stuff, then So then how do you do it? It's not a buzzkill. It's not a buzzkill, because what we're able to do that other people ignore is help people feel into those futures through design fiction. So if we
So-
create the thing that implies that world, and even if it's like, if you do want to make the electroluminescent thing that says, you know, where the shirt changes what it says, which I think is a, you know, it's a beautiful conceit. They were able to tell that story in Westworld without actually, I mean, maybe it was a shirt that actually existed that illuminated letters, but the chances that it actually, that I forget the actor's name, he's a pro football player, was he able to sit there and think like, okay, we got this scene where I have to say bored, let me try to be bored and let's get this shirt to work, and it's not working, and they're saying, come on, just we gotta, we're losing the light. No, they had, it was all a conceit, right? And so how do we do that? How do we bring that to the work that we're doing here, so that we don't actually, you know, do things that are literally impossible, but we bring these things back from the world and suggest it, imply it?
Well, you know, I think that's a good point. And the, you know, the idea of achievability is obviously really important when we're getting down to brass tacks. The you know, during the generative process, I you know, obviously let's just come up with ideas. It doesn't matter if it's doable or not. But the way that I imagine something like this doing is that, you know, we are making a coat from the future, and there's nothing stopping us from selling the coat with, let's say, an elaborate instruction manual. And one of those instruction manuals is that it talks about the sentiment analysis and projection features of the coat that are set to be implemented in 2037. Even though you're buying it in the year, you know, 2023, there's nice ideas there that we can insert in the actual story of the coat without actually having to execute anything. And whether we want to say it's something that happens in the future, or whether it's something like, oh yeah, we have a planned upgrade for this coat, this is why there's a silver thread that runs along here, when in fact it's not a conductive thread, it's just a silver thread. Aesthetically looks cool, but we can also embellish the story of that one thread and say that it serves a purpose, some futuristic purpose. So yeah, I think, yeah, we need to err on achievability once we get through the generative process. But you know, how can we use these weird and wacky ideas in the safe fiction space?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll chime in there too, because I think that's one of the biggest downfalls of any, I'll say, fashion startup or any garment / product startup, is that, you know, you want to embed it with everything. And then inevitably it just costs way too much money. But I think I'm sort of leaning in the direction of the juxtaposition. One, I love juxtaposition, but two, I think it could be really jarring and / not comical, but like almost appropriate for the coat history to be super simplistic, right? Like for it to have this very pared down, not utilitarian, but because that kind of implies a lack of elegance. But the coat to me right now isn't going to be embedded with anything other than just some kind of clever thought. And I think that's simply just to get it made. But then this world, I think, launches us into something way more. And I think it could also potentially be a launch pad for partnerships. If somebody does come to us in a year or two and says, like, we have that material, we want your narrative, you know, boom. That's not likely, but it could happen. I mean, Elon Musk is going the wrong direction for a lot of things, so maybe we take over.
I think Elon is doing exactly what he intended to do, which was to tank Twitter and make it a banking service. So he is like a better way to connect to people's financial data. Like, you know, I don't think Elon's goal is ever to preserve or to maintain Twitter. I think he wanted to sort of transform it in, you know, closer to like a WeChat type app that has everyone's banking info.
So nuts. But yeah, I think it's always good to maintain a level of what we can do. That said, get kind of weird with the spectrum here of the digital.
Well, also there's, making a drop, and there's making like one, really dope working prototype, right?
Yep.
So that they can live, parallel to each other. They don't have to be disparate.
And I kind of, I mean, that's sort of like what we live in constantly, right? Like we live in the real world or the present, and then we are constantly fast forwarding into the near future. So it's sort of like our coat and our digital coat are doing the same. So that's where the chore code is at.
Thomas, do you want to? Is Thomas still there? Yeah.
Sure am.
Do you want to? Your audio is getting a little bit weird, but I think it's okay. Do you want to talk about Green Pages?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, I switched my internet network. I should be on a better one now.
Tim, do you want to share?
Yeah.
So we had a meeting on Wednesday. Me, Julian, and Florian were talking, and we have a goal. We have what we want to make in mind over the next, I guess, month or so, which is like a very polished or a more polished kind of sizzle reel of Green Pages, like 5 pages, so we can really get the feel of what it is. The other side of things is that we want to kind of create I'm working on a Bible. I don't know if people saw, but I put a kind of ideation guide, one technique to ideate for Green Pages, in the chat, and I'll just share that. I'll share that real quick. But we were talking, so Florian created this treatment for a film called The Line, which is a kind of a critique of The Line, the city, but now we've made a movie about it, and he was going to interview a production designer. And then last week during office hours, Dre made a poster for this film. He started adding actors and other little kind of Easter eggs within it. And it was a super generative process, of just like, oh, now we have this movie. Now we can like talk about, how the AI version of Ray Liotta would be interviewed. Like, how would that work? Does he go on press tours? Like, okay, we can make a material about that. And so with this strategy, and we're going to come up with more because there are so many more ways to create content for Green Pages. But for this one in particular, the idea is to, like, step one is to create a movie synopsis. So like, what type of movies do you like, or what do you like exploring with design fiction? And now you can write a synopsis for that movie. And that movie kind of serves as like the anchor point of your archetype. So then you can start like visualizing the film in step 2. So this is when you kind of get into the details of filmmaking or whatever you're familiar with in the film world. It could be the advertisements for the film. It could be the Jimmy Kimmel interview. It could be like the event that happens at the Oscars. It could be whatever you like. But there's this event that happens, or it's like the climate, event that happens while you're making the film. So you can just start ideating about the details of the film that maybe you're attracted to. And then with those details, you can kind of create the actual fiction or the material, but for Green Pages. So if it's about like how the film was written, then maybe you create an ad for the AI that wrote the film. If you're curious about how the film was shot and that's what you're doing, it could be about how, changes in the atmosphere have made a beautiful haze that has really improved the quality of cinematography or something, you know. It kind of, if it's a VR film, then you can talk about how, you can kind of talk about whatever you want, but I think what this is really great for is that it kind of anchors all of our materials that we create for the film or for the magazine about movies within fictional movies. And then beyond that, we can ideate off of each other's plots that we've kind of created or synopses that we've created. So hopefully this is helpful for people if they're interested in creating ideas. Like even just creating a movie plot is going to be so helpful for everyone to, you know, continue ideating. The other piece that we've decided around is this 5-page kind of sizzle reel of a more polished. I put together a PDF like 3 weeks ago, and it was just kind of like a mishmash collage of pieces. We're kind of working on adding more and more to this, but we're coming up with more archetypes, but for articles, but this is a place where you can add and take ownership of different articles or ads that you would want to make for Green Pages. And you just put your name there, and then you can also add on if you'd like, if you use the ideation guide, and I'll make a place for like film synopses and whatnot to, you know, have that as an ideation jumping off point. But I think what's really great about the direction we're headed now is that for a while it was like, how are you going to fill 50 pages or whatever? And now it's like, let's just fill 5 pages and make it look really good. And let's have it kind of, because the line has been this film, this fake fictional film that has created so many idea guides for us, that will be kind of the anchor point, and then we can kind of create around it. But that's what we're going to be shooting for over the next, I don't know, month or so. Hopefully we'll have some materials by next week to share with each other.
Set a
Deadline. Say a deadline. Let's do December 13th. So, or 14th, because we meet on Wednesday, sorry. December 14th, we'll have a nice 5-page sizzle reel of Green Pages with ads and with articles and all the rest of it. If one thing that was really helpful for us was that in our meeting, Julian was just kind of flipping through a Cinefex magazine, so we could kind of get the feel for it, feel for what these ads looked like, and I would encourage everyone, and this is something that I can offer to everyone as well. It's just like looking through magazine spreads and just sort of like picking up a Hollywood Reporter and like flipping through and seeing how that is, that starts getting into like the culture side of Hollywood, and then flipping through a copy of like American Cinematographer, which is obviously a magazine that is a little less accessible, but I think the idea is that there are a lot of flipping through already created publications about film is a really great jumping off point to kind of also ideate, especially in the advert space. So I'm going to be making another ideation guide type of Bible, Green Pages Bible piece for that over the next week. So yeah, that is where we're at. I am inspired by the chore coat Miro. I feel like that was a really generative way to get people involved. So I kind of want to work on something like that hopefully makes it more fun than a Google sheet. But this is this is where we're at, and I think there are some good bones. Green Pages is starting to get some bones.
Yeah,
And yeah, I'm excited about it.
That's really cool. One thing that sprang to mind as you were talking about it is sort of what things are in a movie, what sort of attributes are recordable and programmable in a movie. I was at GDC earlier this year, and there were people who make rides or, you know, sort of arcadey things. And one of the things that they have to curate and construct is linear acceleration. You know, the people build rigs which are on pistons. And I was also in Steve Jobs Theater recently for a thing, and they have rumble seats in the front sort of section of it. And so recording things like actual motion and either field recording or sort of orchestrating motion or other sort of atmospheric kind of attributes for the playback of a film could be a really productive part of advertising for it, because it means that you can either get into some really foreign like lingo or make some stuff up for things that aren't currently considered to be sort of recordable about it. So that's I think a really fun place to play.
Yeah, we started talking about like how will the experience of watching films change, and like the obvious place to jump was VR, and we were wondering like, oh, we got to kind of push past this, like how can we? And that's such a great idea. It also reminds me of like there's like a Disney ride, I think it was like the Michael Jackson Experience, and it totally had those rumble seats, and it was like funny, and it was like a perfect like retro future kind of experience that I didn't know was a retro future because I was like young, but it was like this thing from the, you know, late 80s, early 90s that like was like, this is the future. And it was like, oh, well, it's not, but like people will totally try to bring that back. Yeah, I look forward to it. Does anyone have any questions or more thoughts about things to create, jump into?
I think just staying creative, you know, like not maybe just to your point, like not like anticipating too much as to what it should be, and just seeing where things go. Like yeah. So the other thing, just from a PM perspective, like maybe we find the way to just have a regular series of discussions, you know, like every week between now and what was it, December 14th?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, December 14th. I mean, yeah, I think Monday or Tuesdays, like in the morning, are more ideal for me. I mean, I should just set a time and see what works. I mean, I think Kev, you've had success with the double morning and night, right? Has that been working?
Yeah, the first time we did it, because I think Christina, you're really not able to make an evening session. Anyone who's in Europe can't make an evening session. West Coast, yeah, I found it just gives it more accessibility. Somebody on the East Coast can chime in at lunch if you do it at 9 a.m. on the West Coast. And then the evening session, like for us, allows anybody on the West Coast who's got like a morning meetings if they can't make it. So I like the accessibility. You know, last night it was just Julian and I, but you know, the one-on-one time, you get some quality time together, and then you just kind of go from there.
Yeah.
So I like the double. I think it really helps. It also it does allow you to, as the creator of the event, to kind of think about how can I switch it up. Like I wasn't going to do the accessories board, but the first session helped me figure out the accessories board for the second one. So you edit as you go.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe I'll just throw out some dates in the chat. I think moving to a Monday I mean, we've been doing Wednesday at 10, but a weekly meeting would be good, like just like a weekly share of seeing like, okay, that one feels right. And then I don't know, that I feel like the ads we can move pretty quickly through those.
Yeah.
There is like this sort of challenge of like Florian has this big article that he wants to write, but I'm curious how we can help him with that. I know he wants to interview Liam Young, right? And then yeah, I think a weekly meeting, and then just like working more on the Bible, and then like just creating more avenues for people to participate in and kind of get the feel for the piece. But I do think that focusing on the 5 pages and being able to do some like quality over quantity, we're kind of flipping the script on it, which is good. And like, yeah, there are so many things like Motioner. I know you mentioned like being curious about how to bring video games into this. Like there totally is space for an ad for a movie to be like making a video game out of a movie. And there's like got to be some interesting design and fiction kind of angle that points to things about like how these two industries communicate in the future. Like there's a lot there as well. So yeah, I have to jump, but if anyone has any questions, either DM me or throw it in the chat. Sorry, I have to go, but I do feel like there's a lot more direction, and like the more ideas that I can kind of that we all like share, the more kind of I guess like now we have 5 pages, and it feels like we know what we want to get out of this project a lot more. But just the more ideas, the better, and like we can edit the heck out of it and make it like a really awesome 5 pages, and move on from there. So thank you, everybody.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate it. What else? How's school, Camille? School
is okay. A lot of like group work or partner work, which does not feed me as well. I think I'm just going to propose an independent study because I know what I want out of the academic experience. I just wanted to be in a space with a lot of rigor where I could build a lot of things quickly. That's like my whole reason for going to school. Like basically I wanted to kind of, I really love, the work NFL does, but groups of people move slower, right? So it's like, okay, like I just want to, be in a space where I'm able to make a bunch of creative work quickly, because like I have a million ideas. That's not where I struggle, right? My struggle is picking the best ideas and pursuing those. So school isn't enabling me to do that right now. So I'm talking to my advisor and proposing some form of independent study where it's like, here's a list of projects I want to do, like here's where I need support, like help me make this happen. So it seems like there's a really big disconnect with students from like the community and any form of creative community. Like there's a huge hardware, like I'm in a physical computing class. There was a huge hardware conference last weekend. and like no one knew about it, no one was there, you know, even the faculty wasn't there. Just like, this is like literally 4 blocks away from campus and you couldn't like swing by. I don't know. It's just, it feels really insular, and it feels a lot like undergrad in ways where it's like there's an assumption that my time is always available, which I don't like. Yeah, like, but right now we're doing a studio with Meta, which is nice. It's interesting to have classes with corporate sponsors, just because like expectation and output is different. And I've been in classes like that before, but this is different in the ways that they're sort of working to support the class. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it was always weird doing guest lectures in Wellington. Just the level of an sort of expected investment that most of the students seemed to have in what they were doing was vastly lower than I would have expected, and the pressure from faculty to really consider that this is an opportunity to do something that might mean something to you. This was like a video game course, like a 4th year video game course, and it's just like, why aren't you trying harder? Okay, great.
Yeah, I feel that like it seems like a lot of my classmates are there for a piece of paper. I'm just like, why are you wasting your own time? Like, yeah, everyone in my class is young, and 80%, you know, English is a second language. So there's just difficulties in communication sometimes. Yeah. So I don't know if this experience is true in other places, but that's currently what I'm dealing with. So I think I'm just gonna like figure out some independent study situation where I'm can pursue, you know, my own kind of creative projects with like faculty support / you know, help in terms of like brainstorming and like deadline driven, etc. You know, and watching rigor is helpful for me, right? My mirror neurons fire. So it helps me work watching other people work, which is like why I'm in a school community versus just doing these types of projects on my own. But yeah, I thought I'd be more effective. I don't know. I don't know. Does this square with your all's? I think Kemp's been to grad school. I don't know if the rest of the crowd. I know Julian's been to a lot of school.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about everyone else though. Is this accurate? Does this feel the same?
That
I
fits
think-
with my experience too, is just they don't have that same rigor.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that some people do and most people don't. Sort of credentialism is something that a lot of people are seeking, and that's unfortunate. But very occasionally, there are people who are just super passionate. And if you find them, then you know don't let go. So I was lucky enough to have 2 or 3 people in my kind of cohort of maybe 3 or 4,000 in my year, with maybe 2 in like 1 or 2 in my actual degree, and that was a lot of fun because it meant we could build a lot of the stuff, and then we started the company afterward. But it was, yeah, it was pretty slim pickings and pretty obvious as a sort once you were able to find those people. But I wanted something I wanted to say, which is not totally related, but was related to somebody who did care like that. I went to an alumni event last night and met a guy who is a behavioral neuroscientist who is mapping out the sort of neurocognitive structure of decisions. And he's got sort of electrodes in a brain to look at the actual mechanical function of how decisions happen in monkeys. He started with rats and is now in monkeys. And and he thinks that the level of granularity of information that he's got means that he knows how decisions happen. That you sort of they go back and forth and back and forth, and one keeps sort of spiking more than the other in that vacillation, and then that spills over into the motor function of the animal, and probably happens to us as well, based on the sort of the structural similarity between rodents and primates. And that he thinks long run that it'll allow us to make cognitive prosthesis, so like decision chips and other things like that. And that was very exciting. So sorry for the distraction from your grad school stuff, but I just
I love that.
Really wanted
I
to
love
get it
that
out there.
directionality.
Would that have like
maybe I can hit
Alzheimer's?
myself into getting a decision
Wow.
chip, pretending I have one.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, my decision chip is just I just pretend I have a coin that I'm flipping, and I just go with things because it was so hard, and now I just go. If nothing's winning, then that means that one's as good as the other. I'm just a decision's better than the best decision, than waiting for the best one. But yeah,
That's a good way to like avoid analysis paralysis for sure. Like I just have all these like fucking weird strategies to like make me do things I don't want to. Yeah, I pay for a service where it's like 40 people on a Zoom call, and we all work on things, but I can look up and see other people working, so I'm more inclined to work.
That's fun. I look forward to. I mean, would you do that in VR? Would that help? Would it be better?
Maybe it would work in VR, but like I guess it depends on the type of work you're doing in a VR environment. Plus, like VR is such an innovative environment, it's hard to want to take the headset off, Like at least my kind of VR experience, like that's like the challenge with it is like it's so sexy. It's like it makes everything more appealing than real life.
Yeah.
But real shit happens in real life.
Yeah. No, I'm just so excited about virtual co-presence because it means that we'll be able to kind of create sort of asymmetric performance spaces for people to be able to understand what I'm doing in a way that makes it more legible for them, because right now it's just legible for me and everybody else be damned. That's not necessarily to do with my being antisocial, but just a function of the way the tools are constructed and being able to have an asymmetric environment where, yeah, you maximize the participants' legibility of the task. I think will be really good for, like you said, your motor neuron stuff. Your mirror neuron stuff, sorry. Yeah.
I find this incredibly fascinating, particularly the whole idea of like a Zoom call where you're just sitting there working on your own independent stuff. I wonder, because like I think of like a lab. When I joined this at first, I thought of like a lab as like that physical space where you're all creating stuff and you're jumping over and you're helping with other people's projects. And I feel like that like co-creation, actual work period is missing. Is kind of what we're missing here. I wonder if it'd be worth an experiment to try not just an office hour, but something like that. We're like, hey, I'm going to be working for these couple of hours. Come join the Zoom call. We can collab or not. You can just work side by side.
Yeah, I've definitely done that in other Discords, and I think in March I tried doing one in our Discord. So I think there are a few challenges with that, but that has been talked about. So Nick, if you want to like spearhead that and go for it, just jump in, I guess, donut shop maybe channel, just hit maybe working for this next hours doing these things.
Yeah. Mine are mostly like 9 or 10 at night Central. So it'll be pretty late because I got a day job. But yeah.
That's okay. I mean, I think it's about the setting intention and continuous effort, right? The challenge is the continuous effort. And when you're, in a community of people, the continuous effort, I think, comes more easily, right? Whereas when you're working as an individual, like it's really easy to get distracted or to start pursuing a new idea instead, right? Like, again, that's the like benefit of working in a group versus working as an individual. So, it's like a system of checks and balances. Sorry, Kemp, I think you're going to say something earlier, but then we went into the monkeys chat.
Yeah, I did. My grad school experience was, I kind of got, so SAIC, or the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, is really like when I first started my 2-year grad program, the first day I got like very clearly segregated away from the rest of my group. I showed up in like all sportswear attire. And like, I remember like I sat in the room and everyone sat on the exact opposite side of the room. And it like was very weird because I had come from a very like preppy liberal arts school where like that was the aesthetic. So like I kind of was like, all right, I'm good. And then I'm an only child and like introvert. So like put me in a corner by myself, like I'm perfectly happy, you know, and like now I got a cat. So it's like even better. But I spent my first year just like trying to gain as much access to people as I could. And then I did exactly what you're doing my second year. I just stopped communicating with everybody and I just tunnel visioned. I knew I wanted to go into prosthetics and I knew I wanted to go into like queer, trans world. And so I just tunnel visioned in that. And that was weird because the more I tunnel visioned, everybody wanted to like bring me back into group work. So you kind of have to, there's like a weird push and pull with grad school. It's like I don't know. I felt a weird, because my best friend at the time also started Harvard Business School at the same time. So everything there is like, he's going out for group drinks and no one would even talk to me for the first year because I wore like team shirts and jerseys and stuff. It was so funny.
Bro, you
like,
went
wait,
to an art school.
Yeah.
You went to conceptual art school. Like,
yeah. And they're like, wait, you're into you're making transgender prosthetics? Like, then I became cool, you know? So it was like, I don't know. I feel like I went really broad and then I went super narrow and that really worked for me. But I think if you go the opposite direction, you can kind of shoot yourself in the foot because you miss that opportunity of like getting to know a lot of people at first. But I just focus on learning a lot of professors in different departments.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. Just like, well, it's funny because, you know, like, you know, one of my professors like is your mutual friend, right? So it's like I'm already kind of in this network that's not really student affiliated, but is like, you know, like professionals in this space affiliated.
Yeah.
Like on the first day, one of my professors, you know, mentioned someone who I'd lived with for 3 months in the desert, you know, and I knew that guy better than he did, right? So then it's kind of this weird, you know, it's like I feel like I'm a little bit more kind of colleagues with my professors, you know, but I'm there to build a lot of projects and get more work experience. So it's kind of this like push pull.
I think that's the way to do it, to be quite honest. When I got offered a teaching position at Parsons, I like literally thought I was going to be teaching at Hogwarts. Like that was the dream school for design that I wanted to teach at, right? And I got offered a design strategy position and a fashion position. And then my first class, I had 3 students who are come from billionaire families. And those 3 students just didn't do any work. And I ended up failing those 3 students, but the administration was like, please don't fail these students. But I wasn't teaching to become a professor full time, right? So I had like a little bit more autonomy, but you know, that was sort of this like heartbreak moment where I realized the education world, these students, not every student is in it just for like the sake of loving to learn, right? Like Parsons has this reputation
absolutely. People are
So,
there for
like-
a fucking piece of paper and I hate it. And I'm just like, why are you here? Why are you wasting my time? Like,
right.
you know, I'm trying to
And
build a
that's-
community with these students and they're just not responding at all.
And then I had one student who like has gone on with a startup and still stay in touch. Like it's a real hit or miss, but I find like the roses off the bloom with education in a lot of ways. And like I just am more focused on nerding out for myself rather than thinking that they're going to do it for me, which is, and they shouldn't, right?
No, and like I pursued different alternate education avenues, you know, like I spent 3 months in the desert with this experimental collective, you know, called Mars College, right? Like, so it's not that I haven't tried other non-traditional methods, which I think are largely better, but like those aren't focused around structure, right? And like structure is what I need. Like, and I've tried like working with like coaches and stuff to like create structure in my own life, you know, and I've just really struggled to like be able to kind of consistently like build projects, like unless I'm like also surrounded by people consistently building projects, right? Which is like part of the reason I was so attracted to this Discord, and I've jumped in and participated in everything. So
Could not
like
agree more.
I'm figuring out how can I do this, like in different spaces, like / outside of this space, right? Because like everyone here is like working professionals with like limited time availability, right? Like I've given myself permission to take time to do these things. So
Yeah. Well, so in terms of one of the things that I've really enjoyed, and I've been a working professional, hopefully professional enough for a while, and I've
I think you're just fine, Brandel.
I appreciate it, Camille. But
Professional enough for what?
Right, exactly. Is working in advertising. Dre also has. I'm not sure who else. What is really generative, because you just work on so much silly shit, and that helps with your sort of momentum organs, your ability to just like make stuff that you don't have particularly strong feelings about.
Oh yeah, no, it's training a muscle for sure.
Yeah. And I've loved that about advertising and marketing. And then I've been able to use some of that momentum from that muscle to be able to make those creative projects. But yeah, it is tough. But I don't know that there's any place. I came to Silicon Valley again, sort of thinking, obviously it wasn't going to look like Hogwarts, but there are memes that are very deadly accurate about just the sad, dusty garages and single-story buildings that technology is being built in. And we're upgraded to a sort of a comparatively like similarly drab like 4-story now that Apple's and AR VR aspirations are being sort of grown out of, and it's just like fuck. And also the number of people involved in that thing who don't know the first thing about the history of AR VR, that much of it happened just around the corner, that Atari was centrally involved in it. It's just like nobody cares enough, and so when you find them, it's nice. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I went to an interesting show recently that's all of these like historic computers on display. Like they had an Amiga system, they had the original like Tetris with Cyrillic. They had
That's so cool.
like an old like Mac with a koala pad, which I didn't even know was a thing. They had like this old CRT that was like a drawing machine with like a little controller, and you use like a pen to like drag the cursor, which is like funny because you can understand how it generated the original mouse, but like when you think of it, like I think it was like a Vortex or something. So yeah, it was like yeah, Vectrex, I think.
Vectrex is so good. I love it.
Yeah, so I got to see one of those, which was like dope, and it was like working in action, and I could play with it.
What did it look like? Did it look beautiful? Like
it was the original, yeah. It was the original.
And it was running, so you saw the screen?
Yeah, it was running. I got to run it. I'll send you some like videos in Discord. But yeah, it was sick. Like, and there was like, a Commodore 64 with like the keyboard attachment. That's like the piano keys on the keyboards. You could do like synth stuff. Like, yeah, it was fucking nuts. But yeah, like for me, it's like, why are none of my, classmates here? This gallery is literally a block away from campus. Like, how am I the only person who knows about this? How am I the only person who's here, like interested in this? Yeah.
Yeah, at SAIC, I partnered up with Northwestern's Rehabilitation Center, which is, like part of its own thing, but it's part of the Northwestern Medical Center. And then I went to University of Chicago's Booth School to talk about they have this like incredible business program for startups. And then in my final thesis, people were like, I didn't even know these schools had these programs. And it's like, Chicago has incredible.
Did you look? Like, holy shit,
Chicago,
you're in a major city.
Yeah, these are incredible institutions right here. I mean, it's wild how isolated these places become. And I don't know, there's a complacency with a lot of students who, especially if you're coming from overseas and you don't need, if you're financially without motivation, I think that can sometimes, not for everybody, right? But if there's a lack of financial motivation, sometimes that can really, Parsons has gotten known to be almost a new like Radcliffe
Asian
or,
cash register.
well, people just literally go
What
there
Julian
to
says.
yeah, they get these resumes to then go back to other countries to get married, right? Like it's part of the resume to get married. And it's so problematic because you end up creating a culture where students don't feel there's any collaborative discourse, like there's no creative.
Like, I'll go into studio and no one will be there. And it's like, why the fuck did I leave my house? Like, my house is like a better place to work from than school. Like school, like they have better machines, and they have VR headsets and AR headsets or whatever. But like, otherwise it's just like, why did I fucking leave?
Yeah. It's true. I sat in, I had a call with somebody at Parsons and FIT and then my undergrad alma mater all within a week. And this concept of this maker space versus Parsons went one direction pre-COVID where they basically got rid of a ton of machinery. They got rid of a lot of sewing machines and they opted for making studio spaces that had machines into basically like lecture halls. So they basically just put in lots of tech and they were like, the future is all tech. We're just going to have students come here and the brand will be about New York City and Parsons. And then when COVID hit, now they're struggling to figure out how to get parents to pay $80,000 a year based on the brand of New York City, which the energy has really shifted. I don't know if anyone lives in New York City on this call, but last week when I was there, it's totally shifted.
Yeah.
And having grown up
I
there,
wouldn't
it's
want to be in
different.
New York.
Yeah, it's, I grew up there partly and it's very different. And so FIT, on the other hand, was like, no, we're going to invest in looms and sewing machines. And, it wasn't really cool in the early 2000s. And now people are still sending their kids there because they're like, well, you're going to learn a trade.
Well, yeah, because they also do certifications there. And I don't know if Parsons does, right?
Yeah.
Like that's definitely more like this is training versus this is education. And like, I think I'm trying to assess how the program I'm in, like which way it leans. Like, is it creative technology focused? And we'll use tools. And I'm a little bit like, oh man, like I've done this before for fun. Like, now we're, I don't know.
Yeah, it feels almost criminal.
I thought there'd be people
kids.
as excited and interested as me in all these things, And it's like, what do you mean you haven't explored this tool? Like I created a StyleGAN over the winter to make images look like my cat. Like,
yeah, that's awesome.
Shit like that, where it's like, this is like,
they're just not always in your class.
Yeah.
That's the problem. But I do feel like it's kind of criminal to send kids to school and charge them all this money and then be like, you're on your own afterwards,
Well, yeah, I mean, that's like I think that's a different issue, but I still think that's an issue, right? And like, honestly, Art Center has a lot of professional support. Like that's like, awesome. I think a large motivator for people. And like, that's why, we have like studio sponsored. And it's funny because like, some of the people working at the companies who are in our sponsored studio on like the, meta side of things, they've been through the school, right? So they've had some of the faculty who are now teaching the class. So like, it's definitely professional creative network angled, which I think a lot of other schools don't have. So.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah,
I never went
you're lucky.
to. I never went to grad school. I didn't do anything like that. I did go to a college to take like audio, visual, and multimedia production.
Totally.
And it was interesting because it was only a 2-year. I only spent 2 years in college, and year one was doing everything with slides, film, cutting audio with razor blades, like doing all that stuff. And then year two, there was a big announcement that they had upgraded to a Mac lab. So we were going to relearn everything we learned to do analog in digital.
Mm-hmm.
And I was already a digital guy. So I just thought, this is great.
Great. let me be TA.
I learned everything, right? So when I was using Photoshop, I was like, oh yeah, I understand the concepts of dodging and burning because I did that in a dark room by dodging and burning and doing all that stuff. But in the class that I was in, this is very this is in the mid 90s. So it was early internet. I was already on it. It was the CD-ROMs were a thing. 3D was a thing, or started to become a thing with Toy Story and so on. And it felt like it was really, really exciting. And in the class of 30 something people, 29 of them were phoning it in.
Yeah.
Like 29 of them just, it was, some of them didn't know what they wanted to do. So, and this was a course that they took, right? Technically,
And that's fair, right? Because I feel like a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
people don't know what they want to go, but that's the
I still
complaint
don't.
that I have is this is graduate level, you know, like
yeah, I know, and that's
why it's like, what the fuck?
But I think that even at the graduate level, when I look at you know, friends of mine that are like hardcore in the academic circle, a lot of them just don't know what they're doing, and they're just kind of doing something, but their heart's not in it. And they think that if I do this long enough, my heart will learn to love this, and they never do, and they end
That's
up with
a lie.
graduate's degree. It is a lie. The thing that I've realized, and whether it's in school or whether it's in work, there's always going to be a very, very small percent like that. That 1%, 2%, 3% of the people who are the keeners. And when I was in school, there were 2 other people that were keeners like me, and
I
our
like this
goal-
archetype, keeners.
yeah, and our goal was like, let's do the craziest fucking shit ever. And we would stay really late, and we worked hard, and we drank while we worked, and we did drugs while we worked, and we did all the things while we worked. Like, work was the thing we did all the time. And I had one of the best times, and we had we had to do these final presentations, and the people who were passing, because they checked all the check boxes, you know, make a slideshow, do a thing, and so on and so forth. Here we are, 3 of us, and we have full multimedia productions with slideshows that are being projected inside of video projections, and there's like live music being orchestrated in real time as the presentation is going on, and we just overdid it. And I realized, like, oh yeah, there's going to always be that handful of people. And it's like, find those people. So Camille, like, you're in school with all these people who their heart's not in it. Maybe their head's a little bit in it. Maybe their heart's only a little bit in it. But to me, when it comes to anything that's artistic or production at that level, it's a bit of a eat, sleep, breathe, obsessive. And if you do that, then you're part of that keener group. And you could just find those other keeners, and it's probably going to be 1 or 2 other people, and they might not even be in your own class. You'll probably just have to find somebody taking something else in the same school, and then cross-pollinate ideas and go and do your thing. But yeah, it's and that applies everywhere. I see it when I was a creative director in advertising. I'd have a staff of people that were awesome and competent, and I needed those bums in seats, and I needed the best bums in seats, but there was always like 1 or 2 of them that were just absolute keeners. And it was like, yeah, you're the special ones. You're the ones that are going to be the creative directors in 10 years from now.
Excellent. I appreciate all this wisdom, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, this is fascinating as usual. I also want to just caution you to not avoid the generalists. They may be keen on a lot of different things, but just not be able to spend the time in the lab.
I think that's how I think we
I
all
think I'm more,
identify.
I'm more like a generalist than anything else. But to me, it's like, you know, I'm surprised, like, people had very little understanding of machine learning and AI coming into this program, you know, and I'm just like, where have you been the last 2 years? Like, holy shit, you know, like,
it's exploded. Follow it.
Yeah, well, and now, like, you know, we're studying it, and I'm kind of like, I know this shit already. Like, you don't need to scaffold me. Like,
so everyone everywhere in the near future lab is like a keener, in my opinion, right? Like, it's fucking Friday and we're all hanging out on a Zoom call, shooting the shit about all kinds of nerdy stuff. It's like, how awesome
Okay,
is
I value these office hours a lot. Okay,
I
and
do-
it's
I
only
do too.
Friday
I
morning.
just-
Okay.
I just imagine we would just get in so much fucking trouble if we all lived in the same place together. It would be kind of amazing. But when I think of what we're doing here at Near Future Lab, and just as a group of people that are generalists specializing in generalism and messing about, it's that's a special thing. That's not something that you see in a lot of different places, and you know, it's hard to find. It's hard to find in a community, in a local community. And I've got a handful of friends that I can jam out and do stuff with, but I like this idea, and I really do like this idea of just the collaborative, just jam out sessions. Like, you're
Yeah.
working on your thing, I'm working on my thing, and we just agree that, hey, you know what, 10 o'clock, 10 p.m. I'm jumping online. Let's jump in. And there might be a little bit of conversation. There might be a lot of conversation. Then again, it just
Right.
might be some focused time working. And I've done that with a few friends where we do this thing where we will jump on Discord or Zoom and turn on each other's cameras. And we just work. And sometimes we barely acknowledge each other. But meanwhile, I'm like, I'm just going to go to the bathroom. We'll be right back. And you
Right.
acknowledge the fact that you're going to get up and go to the bathroom. Even if you haven't spoken in 2 hours, right? And I like that. I think that's a good vibe. It reminds me of the coffee shop energy.
Mhm.
Like, I go to coffee shops, I'm more productive in coffee shops and co-working spaces, because it's like, oh, there's other people that are being
Because you
productive.
see other people working. That's
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
That's it. It's really that simple.
Excellent.
Yeah, absolutely.
We also take for granted how much we know about stuff. Like, I think we're all very, very curious, and we're teaching one another about all kinds of stuff. And
Mhm.
you know, we're in almost a year of a hardcore crypto winter, and I just taught
Yeah.
a course on the basics of blockchain, like the
Hardcore
basics.
crypto winter.
Yeah,
I really want that on a shirt. Like, I survived the 2021 hardcore crypto winter.
exactly. And all I got was this lousy shirt,
And I had to pay for it with my day
and I had
job.
to pay 3 ETH for it.
Yeah,
yeah,
back to
right.
flipping burgers.
But I just taught a course to like one of the big
Should have got
banks.
out in 2020.
Yeah. But I just finished teaching a course to one of the big banks in Canada, one of the big 5 banks, about the basics of Web3, blockchain and Web3 in the metaverse. And I went into this course thinking, oh man, this is like, I hope I'm offering value, because, this is basics 101 stuff. Their minds were blown.
Yeah.
They had
Yeah,
no
people just don't
fucking idea.
know.
Exactly.
know.
They
And
really have no idea. And well, that's the scary thing about the central bank digital currency, right?
Mhm.
Because it's like it's marketing itself towards this ignorance of like, oh, blockchain, digital currency. It's like, no,
Yeah,
this
so
is just
cool.
a way to be more monitored and more regulated. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want Visa having my information any more than I want my bank having my information, right? Like,
Yeah.
at least with Visa, they're more incentivized to protect it. My bank is
Yeah.
not. Like, I don't want
Yeah.
my bank having that power. If they don't like my purchases, like, sorry.
Hell, 15 years ago, I was in the same place, right? 15 years ago, I was teaching bankers about the basics of social media. Twitter was huge, Facebook was huge. There was still Foursquare around, but like, they had no idea, absolutely no idea what was going on.
Yo,
So I had to do weekly sessions for them.
I'm going to throw something out there. This is something I've been thinking about for a while. So you mentioned Foursquare. I love Foursquare. I think Foursquare is one of the coolest, most social, amazing apps out there. I remember I could drop into any city. I could just check into the airport in New York City as I was landing, and then within 30 minutes, I'd have half a dozen messages like, yo, you're in my town, man. Let's go do a thing, right? No matter where I went. I just love Foursquare. They've grown to become just like a giant database of locations, and they stopped the gamification of like checking into places. But I still think there's a crypto play. There's a blockchain based Foursquare. Like, no one's done it yet. And if someone were to just like reproduce everything Foursquare did, but just put it on the blockchain, I think it would be a giant hit.
And I think that if you allowed people the ability to delay their check-in notifications, that could be a huge benefit from a security standpoint too. Because that was my big problem with Foursquare is like, I got a family. I don't want people to know exactly where I am when my family is not being watched constantly, stuff like that. But yeah, there was a lot of fun to it. There was a friend of mine who was mayor of my own house.
Yeah.
She just kept showing up and checking into my house.
I think I know there is a location-based token. Because I met an Uber driver who had a separate phone. I was like, oh, like, is that for Lyft or whatever? And he's like, no, actually, this is a token. I'm running this as a location-based token, ideally, data will get sold to FedEx or something, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good way they can pivot. So maybe
Yeah.
pivot. Maybe we can pitch them, Dre.
I'm gonna do some research. I do miss Foursquare. I thought that was great. I'm going to South by Southwest, and firing up Foursquare was just always a good time.
Yeah, that would be a great place for it. I love South by. Such a great place to open here.
To your comment about teaching though, like I had a call, I think 2 weeks ago with somebody at Parsons who is a director level at Parsons, and they're in fashion, so they're not in tech, but they said, but they're brilliant as just an individual. And they asked me how they, when the metaverse was discovered. And that was the question. And I was like, what do you mean when it was discovered? And they were like, well, the metaverse.
Pre-existing, right? It was just floating there in the ether.
So well, 1992, if you want to be precise. I mean, it was coined in 1992.
Coined, created. But like discovered implies it already exists.
by Al Gore, right?
Right. Oh, that would be brilliant. The way that I was like, as a design researcher, I was like, tell me what you mean by discovered, right? Like ask more questions, always lead with questions. And they were like, it's a space that we've tapped into, right? And I was like, no, it's definitely
like land, right? He's the Columbus of the metaverse.
I know. I was like, this is like the marketing. There's a ton of people who really think that the metaverse exists and it has existed, and we just found a way through our technology of evolution to access it finally.
Well, so yeah, it's funny. It's like the metaverse was like the dark web. You needed a special browser to access it,
right?
And someone figured it out. But yeah, I mean, in the course that I talk about, I'm very, very clear that the metaverse just simply doesn't exist. That it's a concept, it's an idea. But what I do talk about is the importance of like metaversal behavior. It's like the metaverse doesn't exist, but how you behave today in ways that we will be behaving in the metaverse is important, because it means that when the metaverse does slowly start to turn into something, if it actually turns into something, whatever it's called then, we'll already have the practice. But in the marketing world right now, all a brand has to do is buy some land in Decentraland, build a little storefront, and pop a game in Roblox, and they can issue a press release saying that like they've just launched a space in the metaverse, like that. The one of the coffee companies, Tim Hortons here in Toronto, just basically set up a game in Roblox where you have to like run around and collect a bunch of donuts and then use a coffee cup lid as a parachute to get back to home base. And the brand, like the press release about like Tim Hortons enters the metaverse, and it's like, no, Tim Hortons made a game.
Yeah.
I mean, it's cool, and it's kind of going to be what the metaverse is like in the future-ish, and it's good for them that they did this. But yeah, it's just a marketing buzzword right now. It's cyberspace. It's the information superhighway. It's all the stuff that we
those things,
the cloud.
Those things are things. So has anybody here read The Friendly Orange Glow by Brian Deere?
Sorry, The Friendly Orange what?
Glow.
Okay.
Glow. GLOW.
All right.
So it's about the Plato system that was produced at the University of Illinois in the 60s as a result of the just insane money wave that came because of the paranoia about the Sputnik satellite. And it was the first network system, like large network system, available to students. They had sort of a Usenet sort of community in the 1970s, late 60s, early 70s, where people were able to work on terminals. They built their own displays, and the community, the sheer like familiarity of the shape of the community is really phenomenal. When you think about your own first introduction into the internet, and you really get this acute sense like that it was a world. It was, to the extent that anything is a metaverse, this thing was a fucking metaverse. Like that people were in there and they lived it and they felt like it was so manifestly different to anything else that they were. But it was obviously they were timeshare text-based terminals. And it's a big book, but it's a really wonderful book if you're interested in the history of technology and the social sort of consequence of that technology. And so I would say that was a good forerunner for when the metaverse was discovered. They didn't have that word for it, but yeah, it was a lot for what we understand to be the kinds of communities we've been able to cobble together through digital mediation. So yeah, I just wanted to add that in there as well.
Brenda, I think that's a really, because I was talking to this queer crypto startup and we were talking about, your point about community, this idea of the metaverse evolving. Like, I don't know enough about Facebook's or Meta's claim in the metaverse and all that, but when we talk about the metaverse, these these startups that are claiming space in it, like if the metaverse is a marketing, I'm stumbling over my words here, but like the metaverse it is a space that someone is creating, right? Like it's not, in other words, like I think people think there's a democratization of the metaverse or a decentralized element to it. There's still a creator to it, right? Like if you're a cis white straight man, if you're a queer person, like there's still a creator or an architect of this. And I'm not demonizing any group at this point, but like I think that is something that the marketing of the metaverse has done very well, making people think that it is this uncharted territory that just got discovered through new tech. And it's like, no. Like it's a community that's being built, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of ideas around what the metaverse actually is. I've been reading Matthew Ball for a couple of years now, and MatthewBall.vc, and he's been writing essays about the metaverse for a really long time. So I think that he has the most clear, sober, and articulate vision of what the metaverse should be. So he just recently released a book a few months ago called The Metaverse and How It Will Change Everything, or something like that, or how this
revolutionize everything.
Everything, yeah. So anyways, really, really, really good book. But the gist of it is that, the metaverse is, it's a massively scaled interoperable network. That's one of the big things. And it's 3D virtual worlds. And there's a lot to unpack there in terms of his definition. He has this very, very verbose definition, but it's precisely crafted so that each beat in the sentence is a bullet point that can be unpacked. And that's how his book is written, that each bullet point is unpacked. But there are a lot of things like the idea of this massive network, this idea that thousands or hundreds of thousands of people are all participating in this metaverse all at once, because it's supposed to be this like persistent real-time network. Right now, the maximum amount of people that Fortnite can have on any given session is like 200 maximum. Like you just the servers can't handle anything more than that. Issues around latency are really, really huge. Like you have to group users geographically based on servers and where they're located in the world because of latency. There are limitations in the laws of physics, like the speed of light is going to prevent us from doing what the metaverse is being portrayed in science fiction. Like we just don't have ways to overcome that. The way that it's being done in video games is there's AI that will see that I shot a rocket in your direction and there's multiple people in the game world, and AI will make an informed decision as to what happens to mitigate everyone's expectations when they come together to realize like it hit the thing or it didn't hit the thing. And because latency is such a huge issue and things can't actually happen in real time, so there are some huge technical minimum specifications that we're nowhere near meeting to get to the point of what the metaverse technically should be. So right now, when you talk about Meta, you know, Meta's stake in the metaverse is just co-opting the term. That's all they're doing. They're like, Horizon is not a great product. If anything, AltSpace VR that's been around since 2013 is as good, if not better. I don't know what the fuck Microsoft is doing not bragging about AltSpace VR. It's like they forgot they own it. But
well, they also it was a pity purchase too, so
yeah.
They don't even.
But it's a great thing. Like that's where
no, exactly. I no argument, but it was a pity purchase. It was just like
I took my clients to I call it the field trip to the metaverse. I'm saying, listen, we're going to go to AltSpace VR and we're going to fuck around and do stuff, and they have a great time and it's awesome. And it's like, if we go in the evening, there's like comedy shows, there's open mic nights, there's Holograms Against Reality, which is just Cards Against Humanity, but with a bunch of virtual people, and it's super fun. But yeah, so anyways, that book is really good, enlightening. I think the metaverse is the real players are going to be like NVIDIA and IBM and companies like that, like NVIDIA, for instance, like Epic Games. Epic is Tim Sweeney. I think he's the CEO of it. He has a very similar, rational, sober vision of what he believes the metaverse should be. And you know, Epic Games has been making games for, you know, a generation longer than Facebook. NVIDIA, who's been focused on graphics GPUs, and you know, they started in 1993. They have 25 years of creating virtual worlds ahead of Facebook. So yeah, Facebook's not, they're not someone to look out for in this world. They're not a player. The one thing that I do think is going to be a big player, and is I think Apple's going to be a big thing. And the thing about Apple is that, like, they've never mentioned the word metaverse. They don't use the word metaverse, and it's because they don't.
Tim Cook, I think Tim Cook did.
Oh, he did.
I don't know what it is.
Oh yeah, I don't know what it is. Yeah, but prior to that,
Yeah.
they've never used the metaverse. They always talk about AR, and it's, you know, it's in Apple's best interest to not lock you inside a headset. They want you using phones and watches and all those real devices in the real world. So AR makes a whole lot more sense. But yeah, I when I talk to my clients about the players, I'm like, yeah, there's the NVIDIAs and the Epic Games in one corner, and then there's Apple, and they're both going to be probably opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of players.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. Well, I mean, one thing that I'm really interested in is like, why isn't the web the metaverse, and what can we do to the web to make it get closer? One of the things that I've said as much as possible to folks is that I think peer coordination systems, so that you can experience the presence of other people in places, is something that I really want to make sure that we have the ability to work on.
Yeah, I think web VR, like I remember fucking around with VRML back in the day. But I think web VR and what's happening in browser is going to be the equivalent of what's happening right now with JavaScript and native applications. It's like you can just make applications inside the browser without actually having to create a native application.
Yeah, no, and it's so traversable and navigable. Web VR is incredible. That's almost half of what I do right now.
How do you combat the stigma? Because there's just a lot of stigma against web-based games, and I can definitely see that transitioning to web-based VR. People just don't see it as legit.
I don't know that exists as much anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when I think about like, you know, that now there's a lot of like in browser 3D modeling editing, right? Whereas like, you
Mhm.
know, 5-10 years ago, it was like you need a SolidWorks license, you know?
Right.
So I think
I
the
wonder if
things
it's
are
the
moving
integration.
online in browser like a lot quicker
Mhm.
because it's a point of accessibility, and that means like younger people get involved quicker, get involved sooner, and I think that erases a lot of sort of the like potential for stigma. You know, I know
That'd
people
be
who would
nice.
prefer just browsing the internet on VR versus not, right?
Mhm.
Well, another thing
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
consider
The
is,
the use of hardware, being able to actually use your video card from the browser helps a lot now. Anyway,
yeah,
go
well,
ahead, Dre.
another thing to consider is like just looking at the GameFi trend in blockchain, where they had like all these crypto gaming world. You know, one of the biggest games was is still Axie Infinity. And one of the reasons why it's the biggest game is because it runs on shitty old phones. And that's why it's a huge hit in the Philippines. And kids were able to make as much money as their parents did working a full-time job. And I think that's going to be a big thing about the metaverse, because right now it's like the metaverse as it's poised to go, it's like you're going to need like an RTX 3090 minimum to get on board, and like Apple users won't be able to use it. Computers aren't powerful enough, and then and you know, so that yeah, it becomes a 1% of the. It's going to be the hardcore nerds that are going to be on the metaverse if it goes in that way.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting with Web VR, Web XR. What the sort of the performance profile of it's going to look like? Because there's the Quest 1, there's the Quest 2, there's the Quest 3. Yeah, Camille, good luck. It was good driving.
Nice to see all you guys.
And whatever else happens in the future, but like, where's the floor? What are the shitty knockoff Android devices? What is the sort of the top end going to look like, particularly for standalone, inside out, hand tracked, whatever else tracked VR? Like, I want to know, because I want to know what are appropriate sort of things to put into the to the engine. Something that I did recently with 3GS, which is the sort of the main thing that people are making Web VR with, is bevels, right? The sort of the shot cutting. I added a custom profile so that you can put cornice molding and crown molding and stuff like that on walls and surfaces. So you can change things from just being boxes and objects to being sort of really encoding for spaces and rooms. And that's been really exciting because it's not that hard. And I think it's transformative in terms of what people believe, what you can sort of understand to be the practical consequence of being able to kind of create these spaces so effortlessly for whatever reason. I'm going to add it to my Wikipedia stuff so that the Wikipedia truly is a museum that you're able to then sort of locomote around to be able to kind of observe all of the different parts of it. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, that's really great.
That's awesome.
I'm seeing this Google Cardboard link that you popped in there, and about 10 years ago, I made a Google, well, not a Google Cardboard. I just made a VR headset out of cardboard in my phone, and I went to the dollar store and I got diopters, like the magnification lenses that old people would buy to read. So I bought diopters, and I got an old Kleenex box, and I cut holes, and I hot glued the diopters in there, and I like elasticed my phone, and I just had stereoscopic images in there.
Yeah.
Remember just this being
that's awesome.
Janky, awesome VR headset, and the cleaners threw it out because they saw some empty, torn apart Kleenex box on my desk. And they just like did their job and cleaned it up.
I actually did get a Google Cardboard about 10 years ago. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to play with my motion sickness. I immediately had to put it away.
Yeah,
because it wasn't ready to track, especially with something like that.
check this out. Yeah, the thing I liked about the Google Cardboard was I love the hackiness of it, right? Like they
Mhm.
were able to hack the magnetometer on it so that you would have that little
Mhm.
magnet, and it would
Yes.
I just loved it. I was like, that what a good hacky trick to create a button on
Uh-huh.
yeah. And
Yeah,
this
that
is,
worked really well.
so Brandel, so what is this
Moray board.
Moray board?
Yeah. So cardboard is intrinsically 3-degree freedom. You only have XYZ rotation.
Yeah.
XYZ. Sorry,
Mhm.
you're Canadian as well. And
Oh, good.
one of the things that a moire effect, like if you look through to sort of layers of mesh, it can really amplify and emphasize translational information. And so if you have just a phone with a camera on it, then and you set up one of these moire boards, then for 3DOF cardboard based systems that have line of sight to that object, then that gives them enough positional accuracy between their accelerometer and this anchoring and registration from the moire sort of box, that they can get 6 degree of freedom while they maintain line of sight with it. But obviously, this can do 6DOF, but this is also, this is no longer on sale because it's the first version, but this was also a $400 standalone sort of object, whereas cardboard is $20 add on to your thing. And so moire board is in that vein, another $20 to give n number of $20 cardboard users 6DOF. And so that means that you'd be able to build a classroom with 1 or 2 of these moire trackers
Cool.
that you'd be able to then get the entire class. And I haven't seen that people have done this. This was in WIS 21. I haven't watched through, I didn't go to WIS 22, but I'm gonna watch everything from it. It's gonna be a couple of weekends of work. But yeah, I think that this would be incredible because like you were saying, Motioner, like 3DOF is kind of sickening. And a lot of people kind of concluded that it was more trouble than it was worth. And I was inclined to agree. I was really excited about it. I tried to use it and it sort of failed me. But if you can get 6DOF working in that level of form factor, that level of price, then I think wonderful, wonderful things happen. So yeah, I would love to see this work continue, and I'm going to keep following it over the years to see what develops, because it's, I think, just phenomenal as a way of opening up and just crushing the price of these experiences.
Yeah, this is great. Another thing that I discovered that I was really pleased with is if you go to Amazon and you look up VR headset, there's a whole bunch of, like, instead of like a cardboard where you're doing a makeshift thing, you can just get like a plastic shell,
right,
with a flip up lid, and it's got a little suction cup type of thing, and you clip your phone in there and you do the thing. But it looks like a legit it looks like a Quest, right? But it's empty plastic. They cost $20, $25. I've bought a few of those in my day for film shoots where I needed a VR headset. It's like, I'm just gonna use this thing. It's $20. It's legit. It looks like a headset. It's plastic mold injected. I imagine, like, it doesn't have to be janky like a Google Cardboard. It can be like, actually, I think he's got a headset similar to that in this video that I'm looking at, that I realize that you're not looking at right now, but I'm watching the video that you sent. But yeah, the kid in the video has just a plastic headset where he slips his phone into. And I remember Samsung.
Yeah, I bought a few of those.
No, yeah, I think Samsung or somebody, HTC, may have sold headsets like that, but
Samsung made the Gear VR.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
Gear, yeah.
But they charge a lot of money.
A lot more.
Yeah, no, but it was really interesting as a foray. I think, like, unfortunately, a lot of people haven't sort of found what VR does for them, and so they haven't worked out what kind of form factors are appropriate for it. I'd be really curious whether people have used AR, like whether anybody's built built-in AR core and AR kit into these cardboard-esque things when
Mhm.
when you have the camera
Right.
exposed, what the sort of the world registration is. I can imagine that it's not great, but I would be curious whether it's worse than nothing.
Yeah.
I might talk to my friend at NY Times VR about that, because that would be good for them
Mhm.
to see where it is, and also the folks at like Niantic Eighth Wall, because they have done a lot of this, and if they can turn phones into headsets, then that would be really nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of just the VR is just getting in there and trying it out. The I had a group of clients and I put them in an Oculus Quest 2, and all they did is they messed around in Altspace VR, barely did anything. They threw some basketballs, but they were surrounded by people. They ended up chatting up with people, and everybody left the room like talking about, yeah, I'm going to get a VR headset. I'm going to buy my son a VR headset for Christmas, and I'm going to use it. and
Yeah.
like it was unanimous. It was awesome.
Yeah, at New Space 2022, we had a group, it was a sponsor, but they brought in a whole set of VR Mars experiences that was a really big hit. And part of that was just getting past the almost the tech barrier, putting the thing on. Because it's a little intimidating to those of us that are not, or some people that are not like us, rather, to put that and isolating environment, particularly when there's headphones added to it. But it opens people's eyes,
Yeah,
even if you can't see them.
Yeah, it does seem super. It's super nerdy and super funny. But hey, we used to make fun of people that wore Bluetooth headsets, and they were
Used
like,
to make fun of people with intelligent watches.
well, yeah. When I look
a
at
remote control watch that I had, and people would make fun of me. I'm like, no, you don't get it. I can turn off the television and prank my teachers.
Yeah. Well, and I think that if there's some similarities there, because we used to make fun of people with like Bluetooth headsets. They were like the corporate finance bros going around having conversations in the middle of the day and so on and so forth. And now it's like AirPods are so commonplace that like if you don't have AirPods, you're like kind of a loser. Like if
or you're more crunchy and you just have to walk around and experience the world as it is,
But if you're using like say headphones, or if you have white wires dangling to your phone, it's like, oh, you're not cool. You don't have AirPods. AirPods are the way to go. So yeah, I think that there's going to be similar with VR. Right now, you're kind of a loser if you're in VR, and over time, it's going to turn into something less clunky, and all the cool kids are going to have VR headsets. So
I always also wondered about Brandle. How do you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Brandle. I always wondered, you were talking about like the camera and the AR function. I've always wondered about crossovers, where you're in VR, but you can pull up a window of AR, or the real world. If someone comes nearby, it'll superimpose them to let you know, that sort of thing, that there's people to interact with around you, or warning systems
I'm not
that
sure.
you're going to run into something,
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that
people call that sort of thing breakthrough, and Quest has it for your boundaries. It might have it for general obstacles. Like it definitely knows when you've tried to set up a boundary and it appears to be there appear to be obstructions in it. That's during calibration. I don't know whether it happens in real time, but yeah, I think it would be reasonable to say that any responsible practitioner of building a VR system or AR VR system would have would put that pretty high on their list.
At least safety net mechanisms, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, pass through is what they call it on Oculus, and it comes in like I love I play Walkabout Mini Putt with my pals, my favorite game on the Oculus, and because it's casual, we're just playing mini golf. The scenes that they set up, the environments are like often just really, really beautiful and nice to look at, and usually I have to get another beer. So you just double tap on the side of your thing, and then boom, you go into pass-through mode, which is like black and white. But I'm able to walk around my house and navigate to the fridge and open it and grab a beer. And there's this like I don't know, 50 millisecond latency. It's just not quite real time. It's not enough to make you sick or not enough to make you totally confused, but it's enough for you to know that like, oh, this is different. And
I'm
then-
living in my house in the metaverse. Yeah.
But then you make your way back to your boundary, and then you double tap the side of your head, and boom, you're back in the golf course. And I think that's really great. I would love an augmented reality experience where I could just have high definition 4K, 6K, 8K pass through, like whatever. I don't know what the actual technical specifications of my eyeballs are. But whatever that is, meet the tech specs of my eyeballs. And then if I could see the world through those lenses and then create the overlays, that's awesome. That would be great. And that's where I think Apple's gonna end up succeeding whenever they do whatever they do.
The Apple contact lenses.
Yeah, I mean,
Apple
ultimately,
lens.
it'll be lenses, right?
Yeah. And then we'll never know if anyone's talking to you or
Yeah.
a VR world. But the Bluetooth headsets made it hard enough.
Yeah, well, I think that was like, because the moment that happens, you start to break apart a lot of the sort of the well-trodden and pretty reasonable assumptions about what people are doing by virtue of being in a place with their eyes oriented in a place, that kind of thing. And I think that was one of the things that the sort of the metaverse talk of creating spaces overlooked, is that, you know, one of the things about having a piece of space here in Meet Space is that it has strict and immovable adjacency rules to other spaces. So if you have a ramen store next to a campus, then Meet Space, and just
Nice.
it's what we call it when we're being facetious about how it's not real life. It's Metaverse. I love it. Yeah. But you know, like if you have a ramen shop outside a college like next to a college campus or in a college campus, then that means something about the adjacency, its notability and things like that. Digital spaces that aren't canonically connected don't have any intrinsic value simply for existing. It's just like having a website, and we went through that in the 90s. We were like, I want a website. It was like, yeah, but like for who, and who's going to link to it, and what are they going to discover there, and what is its function, and we're at that level of rudimentariness, simplicity of people's understanding about what these things are. That's not to say that we should build a singular canonical kind of adjacency for that space, so that you have to walk all down every single aisle and things like that. But what it does mean is that like we need to appraise what the functions of those things are, why you would have things arranged in ways, and what navigability becomes, you know, and so that's where there are just really hard questions about how well different people, you know, from the get-go through to further along, will be able to actually understand and make sense of like how you arrange these things. I've been playing with go ahead.
That just made me think about, you know, you're talking about the ramen store meta concept, and that's kind of how we end up with the ad space that we live in the web today. Is, you know, you can't set up a ramen shop next to the university's website, but you can damn well advertise on it. And that's sort of like the digital adjacency, and you know, there's positives and negatives there to ads over the Meet Space alternative. So I wonder how we could solve that problem in VR at some point. You know, can you sell real estate in your sub metaverse in such a way as to allow those natural relationships to exist while also providing ads? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that certainly from Meta's perspective, the answer is a definite yes. They've been teasing and trying to figure out how to do ads. One of the things that's really challenging about it is advertising on the web is, and maybe other people know more about it than I do, but like is promised to be effective because you get to know so much more about what's happening with your ad. You know, you get paid per, people pay per impressions or they pay per click, but they also get sort of more detailed, various people offer more detailed drill downs of like how people scrolled through it or past it, what these kinds of analytics are. And they're really valuable data, but it's also, once you get to the point of being able to understand things with a headset, because a headset has to know everything about your head and eyes in order to do a good job of displaying that content. And so it's very difficult to keep, you know, that responsibility being done as well as possible while keeping the sort of the data analytics sort of conversation at bay and saying like, we have to know this, but you can't know it. Because once you have people's like, so 5 minutes of 6 degrees of freedom, just head track data, not even hands, not even interacting with specific content, is uniquely identifiable. You can tell who a person is from that. And to say nothing of it, once you get things like eye tracking, you know how a person is, because eye gaze is involuntary. And so what you look at and how you look betrays things about sexual orientation. There are things, once you get into, for example, we can't not read. Those of us who are illiterate, which is everybody on the call, can't not read. And that means that it's an involuntary response. So you can tell if you also have pupillary dilation as a factor and a parameter, then you can use that as a model for how well people understand either a question or say a numerical problem. And so you can distinguish between problems that people, for whom the answer pops into their head versus not. And so that becomes like an immediate proxy for like numeracy, which is a pretty reasonable proxy for economic status and things like that. So like those are super exciting. As research things, they're super exciting and thrilling for people who are who stand to benefit in an advertising context for it, but they're also deeply concerning if you're just selling that information to the highest bidder, because there are people who just want to sell you ramen, but there are also people who want to do a lot more. And the sort of the hostile state infiltrators into Twitter over the last few years, the fact that there were Saudi operatives and other places like that, should give you pause about what sort of corporate surveillance does on top of government surveillance, because they're not always so different. So yeah, these are really exciting questions. And you know, I am excited about the part that I get to play in it, but it's not without its challenges.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. I have a meeting in 7 minutes. I should probably use the restroom and stuff, but it's been fantastic, guys.
Yeah, this was great.
Had a lot of fun.
This is great times.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Have yourself
Adios.
a good one. Good weekend.
Indeed.
Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.
See you guys.